Hi everyone. In today's lesson we're going to talk about measurement. When we talk about measurement, it is broken into three sections. The first here is length and distance. The second is weight. And the third one I'm going to talk about today is capacity. And that's about the weight of things, but I suppose we revert more to liquids when we talk about capacity. All of these measurements have different units that we measure them in, and I'm going to explain a little bit about each of those in today's lesson. I'm going to start with length and distance. Length is the measurement of the distance between 2 points. So that could be finding the distance or the length of something small, like this pencil. We could be also asked to find the distance from the top of the tree down as far as the ground. Or sometimes we can talk about distance when we're talking about very large distances, maybe from one city to another. So say if we wanted to find out what was the distance between Dublin, Ireland and London in England. As you can see, each one of these objects, so the pencil, the tree and the distance from Dublin to London, are very different in, I suppose, size. And so we use different units to represent different amounts of measurements. The measurements for length that we use are millimeters, centimeters, meters, and kilometers. When we write down our units, we usually use these words here in brackets: millimeters, centimeters, just a 1m for meters, and km for kilometers. So which ones is which and which ones do I use? That's what we're going to focus on next. It's really important to remember that in an exam question, if they ask you to give the units, that you write down whatever unit is appropriate, because if you don't, you will lose marks, and they're really, really tight on that, especially in the junior cert. The first one I'm going to talk about today is millimetre. A millimetre is very small. You all have rulers at home and rulers in front of you, and you've actually been looking at millimetres for a very long time. So we see here on a normal ruler, these numbers here are called centimetres, and then we actually have our millimetres up in here. So within each centimetre we have 10 millimetres. So if I was to zoom in here, a millimetre goes from here to here, whereas a centimetre would go from here to here. So we actually have 10 millimetres in every centimetre. So we use millimetres for items that are very small. For example, here I have a die and I've placed it against my ruler, and I can see that it goes just a little bit above here, and I want to give its measurements in millimetres. So remembering that in each centimetre I have 10 millimetres, so this is going to be 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So this side of the dice is 16 millimetres. When measuring, we can use these numbers here, or these lines here, to help us. So if you can see here, we go from 0 to 1 centimetre, and these are quite long lines, and so we can see that the long line has its answer at the bottom. Now you can see that this line here is different in length, so it represents a significant number here. And what I would represent, if I have a look, this is my 0, this is my 1, this is exactly halfway down. So this represents 5 millimetres. And if we look at the die here, you might be able to quickly see, well, that this is 5, this is 5 millimetres, this would be 10 millimetres, this would be 15 millimetres. And so that helps me just figure out that I just need to count one as 16 millimetres. So sometimes we can use these lines rather than counting each one individually. We know that there's 10 millimetres in 1 centimetre. We know that this represents 5 millimetres. So I just need to count on the one. In your quiz attached to this video, you'll be asked to count the lines and mark the correct answer. So that's something to be aware of. The second unit we're going to talk about is centimetres. So a centimetre is longer and it's about the length of your fingernail. And we always remember then that there's 10 millimetres in 1 centimetre. So we use centimetres to measure things that are a little bigger. So you can see here I've got a paper clip and I can see that it starts at 0 and it ends just a little bit above it. Okay, so we would say that that's 3 centimetres, and if I wanted to write it in centimetres, it's just a little bit above, it's actually 2 lines above, so I would say that's 3.2 centimetres. And then a key from 0 the whole way up, it ends at 5, so I'd say the key is 5 centimetres. Okay, the next one we're going to talk about is metres, and it has the unit just m. So we use this to measure bigger things. Okay, so we're not going to be getting our little rulers out to measure a bed. We're going to get our metre stick or our metre wheel. So a metre stick, you probably recognise it from any of the maths classrooms you've been in, but a much longer length. What a lot of engineers do, or people who are making roads or making buildings, they obviously would find it very difficult to measure with a metre stick, so they use a metre wheel or a trundle wheel. And when you walk this along the ground, it does a little tick, so a little bit of a sound, and that means 1 metre, 2 metres, and so on. So you'll have seen one or both of these methods before that. Now, when it comes to going backwards with this, how many centimetres are in a metre, and we would have to learn that 100 centimetres in each metre. And just to add into that, we know already that in each centimetre, so in 1 centimetre, we have 10 millimetres. So some language that we need to be aware of the whole time. And the last one we're going to talk about with regards to length is kilometres. So this is for extremely long distances. So from Dublin, as I said earlier, to London, that distance there is 463 kilometres. Okay, so a long distance there. I don't think we'd be walking it anytime soon, or we'd have to do a little bit of swimming to get there. But just to bring it back into all of the other units that we used, so 1 kilometre has 1,000 centimetres. So something to help you, if you are going from millimetres to centimetres, you're dividing by 10. From centimetres to metres, you're dividing by 100. From metres to kilometres, you're dividing by 1,000. And if you're going backwards, you're doing the opposite division, so you are multiplying. Okay, so activity 1 is up on Schoology now, and this is asking us to convert the units to different units. So millimetres to centimetres, centimetres to metres, and so on and so forth. So the last slide will be super important. And if you want to pause the video now, you can go and do activity 1. At the start of the video, I mentioned that there was 2 other options that we use for units of measurements, capacity and weight. Another word we use for that is mass. So mass is the measurement of how heavy an object is. So which units do we use to measure mass? Maybe you can even remember them. We use kilograms, which have kg, and grams, which have g. So a bag of flour has a mass of 1 kg. A drawing pin has a mass of 1 g. And so a drawing pin is probably another word for a thumbtack. And so you can see these would weigh very differently. So we use grams for things that are very light and kg for things that are much heavier. So here we have 3 different objects: a pumpkin, a hen's egg, and a tin of beans. When you get tins of beans or anything like that, you can always look at the back of them, and they should normally have the weight at the back. So this tin, if I was to look at the back of it, would say 400 grams. A pumpkin obviously is much heavier than a tin of beans. So pumpkins are usually weighed in kg. Some of them have a mass between 5 and 11 kg. However, the world record for the heaviest pumpkin is over 1,000 kg. So I don't think we'd be carrying that home in our shopping bag. A hen's egg, we know ourselves, is very light. So we would recommend that we would measure that in grams as well. So we would go kg for the pumpkin, grams for the hen egg, and grams for the beans. In 1 kg, we have 1000 grams. When we weigh grams, especially, and kilograms, we use scales. So what I want us to look at here is I want us to figure out how heavy Tom is. So Tom is a red alien and we want to try and figure out how heavy he is. Now, this here represents kg, which means that everything here is a kg. So this would be a bigger version of what we would have in our kitchens, because normally in our kitchens we might have one here that says grams. But anyway, how heavy is Tom? We can see here that there's only one marking on the dial, and that's 40. So we need to figure out what each of these lines mean. So I know from here to here, I've got, say, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we know that there's 8 sections here, and that gives me 40. So what I need to do is I need to figure out what each of these sections are. And so you might decide, well, there's 8 sections. The number I'm looking at the end is 40. So it would be 40 divided by 8, which if you type that into your calculator gives you 5. So what that does, guys, is that actually helps me figure out what each one of these lines is. So I know from here to here is going to represent 5 kg. And once you've figured that out, you should be able to figure out this one, 10 kg, 15 kg, 20, 25, 30, 35, and then that gets us there to 40 kg. So we want to figure out how heavy is Tom, and you can see the red dial is sitting on his weight, so Tom is actually 5 kg. Okay, so see if you can have a go at this one. Here's Taha, he's sitting again on a scale. We don't know what this number is. We know that this number here represents 120. So I want you to have a go now and see if you can figure out what weight is Taha. Press pause on the video. Okay, hopefully you got 6 sections here. So it's 120 divided by 6, which gives me 20 kg. Okay, so at the start I said we were going to talk about length and distance, which we've done, weight, which we've done. So the last one is capacity, and capacity is how much a container can hold. So we usually measure capacity in litre, and because if we were to write the L, it would look too much like a 1. When we're talking about litres, we always write the full word, so litres. And then millilitres, we can obviously write ml for short. So a standard carton of juice has the capacity of 1 litre. So your carton of milk, your carton of orange juice, your carton of almond milk. And 1 millilitre is quite a small amount. So it's about 20 small drops of water. So 20 raindrops would be what 1 mil is. So I suppose it's a very small amount, and we might use small millimeters when we're talking about maybe taking small amounts of medicine and things like that. So it's really important that we can recognize the difference between a litre and a milliliter. So a drinking can, if you look at the back of your can of Coke or your can of orange, it'll have ml written beside it. A teaspoon would obviously have ml written beside it, but a tin of paint would have litre. And remember, we spoke about always writing the word litre because it looks too much like a 1. So depending on what type of measuring jug you're using, it might use the word litres or it might use the word millilitres. So hopefully you can see that if 2 litres is 2000 millilitres, you can see that 1 litre is the same as 1000 millilitres. So that's also important for if we're changing our units. So let's have a little recap. So our distances for length are going to be millimetres, centimetres, metres, kilometres. For weight, we're going to have grams and kilograms. And for capacity, we're going to have millilitres and litres. Sometimes your parents might use the word miles, they might use the word tons, different type of units of measurement. They're what we call the old units of measurement, but for us we only use the new kind. So that would be any of the ones here in the blue boxes. So millimeters, centimeters, meters, kilometers, milliliters, liters, grams, kilometers. So there's a quiz you can go on ahead and do now on Schoology.